Hello, today I'm going to show you how to create this rope effect. So this is the project in the end of the video, and this is our end result. We would code all the necessary stuff in this video. So the way it works is basically we connect to one rigid body and we would pull it whenever we hit something. So we would add force toward this position. It works with any rigid bodies, so this box just have a rigid body and the collider. So let's set it to have the rope, and now the box has a rope. So we also use a line renderer to draw the actual line. So um, this is the line renderer, and now it's drawn from 00 to 22, and it's because we use the use world space. So if we disable it, uh, now the line actually offsets based on this transform position, and if we enable it, it just ignores it. And we want this to be checked, and it's automatically checked when we just create line render through code. We would then set one of those positions to our starting position and the other one to the actual transform that we are drawing. Now this would be the actual transform we send. So we would want to create on it a circle collider 2D and use is trigger because we would check collision on is trigger event. Then we would use is kinematic because we don't want any physics, and we would also check the collision detection to continuous, so the rope won't go through objects because of its high velocity. So now let's actually write the code for the spider rope. Let's call it spider rope, and the first thing we would want is a line render. So let's call it line and say line equals to get component line render. So in our case we don't have any line render, so let's just create one. So if no line, we would say line equals to game object dot add component line render. And now we would want to set the width and the width of the line. So let's create a public variable called line width. So let's say it's 0.1. So line start width equals to line width and line dot end width equals to line width. So basically you can make the start and the end to be slightly different, and you would get growing or shrinking lines. Okay, so this is probably all we need. Um, Now let's say the set position of our first index of the line. So let's actually create a new line. So this one we would set to the transform. So a transform dot position, and currently let's just leave it like this. Okay, so let's actually use rigid body 2D and origin, and say the line dot set position dot one would be origin dot position. So if we now take this, add the spider rope, and add to our transform. So actually, let's just use the head. We would get a line between our head and the transform. Okay, so this is basically it. As you can see, there is no material, so let's just add it real quick. So public material mat, say line dot material should be the material, and let's just use this one, and now we have a line. So I would actually connect it to my hand, so I don't need this. God damn it. Okay, so now we have a line between our hand and the actual transform we want. So now we would want to actually shoot the rope instead of setting it to this position. So the way we would want is first of all, we would want to get the world position of our mouse whenever we click. So in my case, I would actually use another script that would just get it for us. So let's do a rope setter, and okay, so rope setter would actually have this public spider rope, and let's use rope, and here we would want to create void set a start. So let's actually get a vector2 world target pose, and let's set the transform.position equals to target pose for now. And here, if we press the mouse, so input dot get key down, I would say keycode dot mouse 0 and drop dot set start. So this should be public. Okay, dot set start, and we'd pass here vector2 world pose equals to camera main dot screen to world point and input dot mouse position. So this is our actual mouse position in the screen. Now we would actually pass this, and this is basically it. So now just let's use this, let's set it, and now we got the mouse position in the right place. So let's actually create the shooting effect. So here, instead of setting it to target pose, we would want to set it to the origin position. So it would actually start from the actual hand, and let's create another variable called vector2 tier, and it would be the target position minus origin dot position. Yeah, so basically, if you have 2 points, let's say this one and the head, if we do let's say 10 and 0, and the other one is 0 and 0, we would get a 10 vector. So now we actually know that we need to move 10 in the y to get to this position. And we would want to actually normalize it so it doesn't affected by our distance. So normalize is basically bounded to be just 1 in the distance. So the distance will always be 1. And the first thing we would want to do is add once the dir here, so we don't actually start from the hand and we would start a little bit further, so when we are near some colliders it would go through them instead of colliding with something really close. Okay, so now let's just add a velocity vector. So pub private vector free velocity, and let's say that velocity equals to dir times speed. So let's add float speed equals to, let's say, 75. So now we add a velocity, and let's just here say transform that position plus equals velocity and time dot delta time. Okay, so now we would actually shoot, and yeah, we get what we wanted. So next step would be to actually detect collision. So a real important step is we would want the rope to ignore our stickman. So let's say we shoot from here toward here, it would just hit our stickman and we just don't want it. So let's say this spider rope to be equal to this test layer. So just add a new layer, and we would go to the project settings and make test ignore itself and ignore the stickman layer. So you would want to create a layer for your stickman. So let's actually create a new layer. Let's create a new layer for also stickman 2 and rope. And let's say this would be stickman 2, yes, and this would be the rope. And let's go to the project settings and disable the rope collision with the stickman and the rope. Okay, let's now do void on trigger enter. So this is why we use a trigger here, and whenever we actually hit something like the ground or something, we would get this method to execute. So let's actually just say velocity equals to vector 2.0, and this is it. Now we would have a collision. Okay, so this is the first step, but as you can see we actually can shoot to infinity. So let's fix it next time. Okay, now we would want to pull our stickman toward the collision point. So let's create a new private bool and call it pull, would be false, and let's say public float pool force would be 50. And here you would want to say pool equals to false, and in here we would say if pool do something and else actually update the position. Let's say pool equals to true, and now we would want to update our origin position, so we would want to get the direction toward our collision. So it's the collision position is actually transformed position, and let's use here vector 2, and let's just say origin dot add force. So you always want to use add force on rigid bodies that are affected by gravity instead of just setting the actual position. So here we would say direction times the pull force, and this is actually it. So we don't normalize here. uh, you can, but I wanted to have the spring effect. So as you can see, whenever it gets really close, it starts to pull stronger. And if I actually remove it and say dir equals to dir.normalize, I would get the same force in all the times. Ooh, so it's really weak, but let's just make it 150. And as you can see, it's always really strong force. So it depends on what you want to achieve. Um, okay, so there is one last thing we would want to fix, the line going to infinity. So here, let's create a new private bool. Let's call it update. Let's make it false. Here we would say update to true, and here we would say if we are not updating, just return. So in here we would say float float distance, and it would be the vector 2 distance between our transformed position and origin position. So the two ends of the rope, and if it's greater than some value, let's say 50, we would want to say update equals to false, and we would want to reset these positions so we would not see the line anymore. So vector 2.0 and vector 2.0, and so this won't actually update. Let's return from here. Return. So now whenever we shoot and we don't hit anything, we actually removing the line. Okay, so let's use another line from the other hand, and it's really simple, just copy paste. Let's use another hand here, so hand left. Let's go to our rope setter, and instead of using one object, let's use two. Let's make private int index and say 0. And here we would say rope index and index plus plus, and if index is greater than row dot length minus 1, would say index equals to 0. So it would always loop through all these spider ropes. Let's set those to this one and this one. And now we have 2 ropes. And one last thing that we can add, let's just make the rope to actually go away after a fixed time. So let's go here, let's add a float called public float state time, and let's make it 1 second, and let's create a private illuminator, so it's a timer. Let's call it timer, and let's here create the timer. So and let's make it float delay. So if yield return you wait for seconds, and let's actually use the delay. And if the delay ends, we want to do the same as here, so we would stop updating and remove the line. Okay, so when would we create the call this method? We would want to actually disable it whenever we get this set start method. So first of all, we would say if reset, if timer not equal to null, would say stop current time, and it would be timer. So here let's just say timer equals to null. I'm not sure if it's done automatically or not, but to be sure, let's do it. And here we would say timer equals to reset, and let's pass the stay time. Yes, stay time, and start current time time. So now whenever we get collision, we would start current time and we would remove the line after 1 second. And yes, it works. Let's actually make more force, so 100. And this is it basically. Yeah, so thank you for watching and see you next time.